video is going to be round 2 in my Palette Madness tournament. This was inspired by many a thing. March Madness is a college basketball tournament that comes around every single year, and I have such fond memories of filling out my March Madness brackets since like 8th grade. Like, I vividly remember an 8th grade spring break trip sitting watching both the U of M men's and women's basketball teams were in like the Final Four. Maybe not the Final Four, but like they were doing well in the tournament. And I remember like sitting watching the tournament with my grandpa, and I just have really fond memories of that. Love sports, love competition, and I also love to chat about eyeshadow palettes. So I was inspired by a comment that was left in Sophie Alexandra's palette battle video that was saying like, I would like to see this in tournament form. So I decided to make a tournament out of my 160 eyeshadow palettes. I do have a few more than 160, but there's some that I hadn't even gotten around to testing that didn't quite make it into the tournament this year. And already my like mind is turning with little tweaks and things that I want to do for this next year. I have also decided when we reach the championship video, I don't know if it'll be part like 4 or 5, there will be a giveaway. And I'm thinking like I want to do like the palette that wins, I'll give that palette away, but I'm worried that it might be a palette that's like no longer available. So I got to figure out what the giveaway is going to be, but just know I am going to be doing a giveaway at the end of this tournament. The way that I made my brackets was that I used the Tiny Decisions app, and I just randomly rolled and filled my bracket out until all of my palettes were listed in the brackets. If you missed round 1, I'll leave that video linked down below, but 160 eyeshadow palettes went head to head against one another. So the tournament is now down to 80 eyeshadow palettes, and I have 80 pairings. No, I have 40 pairings of eyeshadow palettes, right? Yes, 80 eyeshadow palettes, 40 pairings, and we are gonna see who gets to progress along in the tournament. So if you guys are interested, stay tuned. First, if you haven't yet, to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, we do it all over here, and I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. I almost forgot to say, you guys, happy palette day. I believe day 3, assuming that I'm posting things in order that I'm wanting to be posting. Fingers crossed it goes that way. As I was looking through the brackets, I was like, ooh, there are gonna be some really difficult, there's some good competition out there. I'm also noticing I need some Lawless Forget the Filler on the lips. Which one is most near to me? All right, we went with the shade Annie on the lips today. Okay, round 1, we're kicking it off with already a very, very difficult pairing. So we have Persona Identity 1, which is an absolute favorite eyeshadow palette in my collection and has been for so long. I literally have the OG packaging. I love this palette so much. And this one is against the Adept Ninhydrin palette, which is such a beautiful eyeshadow palette for like special shades. Okay, this is so difficult because for every day I love Persona so much, and I feel like this would be like a top seeded palette, obviously, because it's one of my top favorite eyeshadow palettes. And if it was against just about any other palette, I feel like this one would advance forward, but I'm like, these shades are just so special, and hopefully we have other neutral eyeshadow palettes that are advancing forward. It's just so difficult because for a neutral everyday, I love the shimmer formula in the Persona, like in the Persona palettes, because they are so smooth on the eye and just so flattering. But I feel like I need to give it to the up and coming, the rising star, if you will. I need to give it to Adept Ninhydrin just because I feel like specifically like this shade right here, and then these two like green duochromes or multi-chromes at the end, like I just feel like they deserve to progress and advance forward in the tournament. So I'm a bit shocked because I really, really thought that I would be going Persona, and I'm still struggling with this decision, obviously, and it's paining me a little bit, but I think Adept Ninhydrin is moving on. Okay, this next one is also a difficult one. So we have the It's Belle Cosmetics The Flare eyeshadow palette, which is this really beautiful 9-pan palette, and it is up against the What's Up Beauty Desert Monsoon eyeshadow palette. So a 12-pan palette. This one has 6 shimmers, no, 2, 4, 7 shimmers and 5 5 mattes. I'm like, I thought this was 12, but it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That math doesn't even work. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. There's 2, 4, 6, 7, and 5 does make 12. Wow. Alarming. Okay, this one's so tough as well because I really, really love all of the shades in this palette, but it's obviously more of a companion palette. And I do really love, I think I'm gonna go with Desert Monsoon on this one. I like the inclusion of the mattes in this eyeshadow palette, and there's some really fun special shades in this one as well. Like Succulent is so beautiful. Downpour makes such a pretty blue nail polish. I also really like the shade Humidity and Sun. So Desert Monsoon is moving on. All right, then we have the Sigma Corta Rosa eyeshadow palette, a really, really beautiful eyeshadow palette for spring summertime. Obviously you can wear your makeup anytime, but this is definitely something that gets more use out of me in the spring summer. And this is going up against a more fall winter eyeshadow palette in the Fantasy Cosmetica Druid palette, which I also really, really enjoy. And the Druid palette has a few more special shades. Sigma has more mattes. Oh my gosh, these are actually like getting really tough. I like both of these palettes obviously for different reasons. I think I'm gonna have to give it to Druid just because I really love like these two special shades. Like I really, really enjoy those. Whereas like this Color Story is really beautiful, but I feel like I could find this more easily in other eyeshadow palettes if I had to, and this one has some very unique and special shades in it. So Fantasy Cosmetica Druid is gonna take this round. Okay, the decisions do not get easier. Next up, we have Urban Decay Stone Vibes against NARS Summer Solstice. We know how much I love NARS Summer Solstice. This is the palette that made me become a NARS stan. And just, I've not looked back. I wore this palette so much summer 2021 and just have so many fond memories with this eyeshadow palette. But then I also really love the Urban Decay Stone Vibes, and you definitely have some more variety in some of the shades within this eyeshadow palette. Oh my gosh, you guys, this one is actually so tough as well, but I think I'm gonna have to give it to the NARS Summer Solstice eyeshadow palette just because I feel like for day-to-day wear, this is an easier reach for me. I've definitely reached for this eyeshadow palette more in my collection. Like this palette practiced a little bit more for this tournament, and so Stone Vibes is gonna lose by just a little bit. So NARS Summer Solstice is gonna move on. Okay, as I said, decisions are not getting easier. Next up, we have the Lethal Cosmetics Midnight Serenade eyeshadow palette. And this one is going up against the Adept Heather Austin eyeshadow palette. And this is also such a tough one because I love the shimmer and special shades so much in each of these eyeshadow palettes. My one gripe with the Lethal formula or this palette is I feel like the longevity of this eyeshadow palette is just not as long. Like I noticed that it's not as long, which I feel like isn't always something that I notice with eyeshadow palettes. So I feel like I'm gonna have to give it to the Adept Heather Austin just because I feel like it's a tie aside from like the longevity, and the Adept Heather Austin is a little bit better than Lethal Midnight Serenade. So Adept Heather Austin is gonna move on. That was tough though. Okay, and then I have the Natasha Denona Gold eyeshadow palette against Adept Minka. And this one actually is not super difficult. I think both eyeshadow palettes are beautiful, but this is like an OG. Holy grail. Would be dying if I didn't have this in my collection. I'd be so sad. Like I would need a week off of work to like even start to begin to process what it would feel like if I did not have this palette in my collection. I'm being way over dramatic, but I would be very sad to not have the gold palette. So gold is moving on, and I'm sorry, Adept Minka, you're going home. But you know what, some of your sister teams are still in the tournament. Ooh, okay, this is a good one. This is a good one. We have the Rowan Mood Forever against the Natasha Denona Mini Biba. Actually, maybe this isn't a good one. It's gonna be Rowan Mood Forever. We know how much I love the Rowan quads. If this was Mini Nude may have won, but Mini Biba just actually is not my favorite Natasha Denona Mini. So we're giving this round to Mood Forever. Okay, and then this one is difficult. Both are two indie eyeshadow formulas that I have really been coming to love as I've been trying them. But we have the Ensley Rain Groovy Gardens palette against the Unearthly Fall Magic, and I feel like, I don't want to say there's necessarily some overlap between the two of these, but there's like, you know, a little bit of similarity. I have not yet tested Groovy Gardens much at all, so I'm going to give it to Fall Magic simply because I have used every single shade in this eyeshadow palette. I've created some really, really beautiful looks that still to this day I think about and really, really enjoy. So as of right now, it's going to go to Fall Magic. When I get done testing this, maybe my feelings would have changed, but there's always next year's tournament. You know what I mean? Okay, this one is tough. We have the Bella Beauté Bar Angles of Illumination against Natasha Denona Mini Nude. So we have an OG, a palette that I've repurchased because I love so much, against this really beautiful all shimmer palette. Like, it's definitely a companion palette, but I've really, really, really enjoyed some of the shimmers within this eyeshadow palette. I'm gonna have to give it to Mini Nude just because I've worn this one so much more. But this is such a solid eyeshadow palette, you guys. I have really, really, really been enjoying my time using this. And there's been days where I'll create a look and think I'm done with it, and then I'll just bust this palette out and be like, you know what? I feel like this look could also just add, like, I could just use a touch of one of the shades within this palette and it adds something truly so special to the lids. Like right now, I kind of want to add a little bit of Sunlight. I think I might, even though this is going to end up being a little bit more... Is it gonna pull kind of blue? It did the other day. Maybe not. Ooh, okay. I feel like that takes away a little bit of like the almost like yellow gold green from the front, which was giving kind of like Packers vibes. Ooh, okay, I like that. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit to this eye. Yeah, I really, really enjoy this. But I mean, it's going against Natasha Denona Mini Nude. I just have to give it to Mini Nude, but that one is also tough. Okay, you guys, we have Natasha Denona Biba against another OG. It's going up against Huda Mercury Retrograde. I have loved both of these palettes in my lifetime, and I still really do love both of them. I'm gonna have to give it to Biba. This is just something that I continue to like. I love this color story more than I like this. This is something I used to love so much, but I've kind of fallen out of love with it. Like, it's just kind of there in my collection now. Whereas this, I just feel like this color story and the quality in this palette is just so good. So it's gonna go to the Natasha Denona Biba. Next pairing is two indie brands. So we have the Bella Beauté Bar Basic Witch eyeshadow palette, and this one is going against the Odin's Eye Flora Story palette, and I'm gonna have to give it to Bella Beauté Bar Basic Witch. First of all, this one just has more shades. This one has some really, really fun, vibrant purples. I love the orange that we get up here, as well as this matte green, and I love... Like, I'm like, should I now pop Hocus Pocus onto my eyes too? I'm not going to, but I'm thinking about it. Some of the special shades in this palette are truly just so special. I'm telling you, Bella Beauté Bar has an incredible, especially special shade formula. I still really enjoy this palette, but this round is gonna go to Basic Witch. Ooh, okay, this one's a wee bit difficult. So we have the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze eyeshadow palette, which I really do like. The Artist Couture palettes, with the exception of Supreme Mauve. So that was just a letdown. And then we have that against this one from Pat McGrath, which I believe is the third eyeshadow palette. I don't know what it's called, and it's not on the packaging. This one is also really beautiful. We have some pink tones, but we also have like a pop of green, a pop of gold. And I think I'm gonna have to give it to Pat McGrath in this round, just because I really do like this green shade, as well as this shimmery pink shade up here. Or like the special pink to gold shade is really beautiful. I've created a couple looks with this eyeshadow palette that really stick out in my mind. So this one is going to be advancing to the next round. And then we have the Kaleidos Escape Pod against Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2. So a more colorful color story against this really beautiful rosy toned, more neutral color story, but this one is known to grow mold. But I've recently no pan left behind this palette, and I forgot how absolutely incredible and easy to work with the Patrick Ta mattes are. So I'm gonna give it to Patrick Ta. Patrick Ta is going to be advancing in this round. I feel like that's an upset that people are like annoyed about. Like it's like a team that you weren't really rooting for that's like doing well in the tournament, you know, and they keep just winning. Like I get it. I get there's the controversy with the mold and that's disgusting, but there's no denying how good the mattes are. Okay, this one's also kind of difficult. We have an OG staple in the Natasha Denona Glam against this really beautiful palette from Glaminatrix. This is the Rich Romantic palette. And I think for an everyday staple, like I definitely would say Natasha Denona Glam. I've really enjoyed using this palette this year. I know Pan left behind it. I wore this to an event with my daughter and I really, really loved the way that that look turned out. So like there's that in my mind. But then the special shifty shades in the Rich Romantic are truly something so, so special. This is so tough because like I feel like my heart is telling me this one should win, but then I would also be sad not to have the special shimmers. I think I'm gonna give it to Rich Romantic. Ooh, that was a tough one though. That one, ooh, that I'm still like questioning my decision, but we're going with that. That was like an overtime buzzer beater sort of situation type of win. If you guys are basketball people, maybe you know. If you're not, maybe you're super annoyed at my tournament analogies. Okay, this one's also really difficult because I feel like the color story is kind of like there's some greens and some, you know, warm tones in each of these. So we have the Nomad Okavango Safari palette up against an all-time favorite in my collection, ABH Jackie. My initial like gut is telling me to go ABH Jackie, but then I'm like looking at this and I'm like, but look at this beautiful grungy gorgeousness. I think I'm still gonna have to go ABH Jackie just because I just have my favorite shades in this palette that I absolutely love. I recently created a look with this palette and I was like, yep, it's still good, still what I remember. So ABH Jackie is going to advance. Okay, and then this is kind of fun. The next pairing is a Pat McGrath Mothership palette against a Pat McGrath Quad. So we have the Utopian palette against the Interstellar Icon Quad. I think I'm gonna go Interstellar Icon Quad because we know how much I've really fallen in love with blues, and I also really enjoyed these two shades as well. Like a really beautiful champagne with like almost like a pink glitter in it, so it just has this really beautiful finish, and then this really beautiful deeper like satin taupe, like dirty taupey sort of shade I also really like. So even though this comes with less shades, I'm actually gonna give this round to Pat Interstellar Icon. All right, you guys, moving on, we have the Bella Beauté Bar Dead Roses against ColourPop Wild Child. This is really difficult because this palette is so much easier for me to create a look that I'm gonna feel comfortable and confident in, and to quickly create a look like that. And then we have this, which is a color story definitely outside of my comfort zone, but there's also some really, really beautiful shifty shades. And I feel like maybe if you're watching this at home, your guess is going to be that I'm going to go with Dead Roses just because of those special shades. But I actually think I'm going to go with Wild Child just because I love this for like a deeper, more sultry, warm, smoky. I think it's one of ColourPop's like best palettes that they've done. So Wild Child is actually going to advance. And I'm sorry, Dead Roses, you're going home. Okay, this one is like a good pairing, but also not a difficult decision for me. So we have the Huda Beauty Naughty Nude against the Natasha Denona Yucca palette, and it's definitely going to Yucca. I mean, yes, it is St. Patty's Day, the day that I'm filming this, but like, even if it wasn't, I love wearing green eyeshadows, so we're gonna have to advance that one. All right, then we have Ensley Rain Cold Moon against, if I can, pop that one open, against the Too Faced Italian Spritz eyeshadow palette. And this one is difficult just because I really like both of these for separate reasons. I am gonna have to give it to Ensley Rain Cold Moon just because there's so many special shades in this palette, and this palette is really easy to just pop a matte in your crease and then pop one of the shades on your lid, and you will get the most like impactful punchy look that took you like 3 minutes to create. Love this palette, but I also really do like Italian Spritz, so it's hard to send this one packing. Ooh, this one's kind of a difficult one. So we have the Natasha Denona My Dream eyeshadow palette up against the Odin's Eye Jewels and Gem. And this is difficult because overall I would look at this color story and this would be the palette that I would pick, but there were a few matte shades in this palette that I just felt like didn't blend the best, weren't the easiest to work with, and I have no issues with blending. Like, this is one of the better Natasha Denona formulas I found in her midi palettes. There are some special, like, I love the shade High. I also love the shade Rhapsody in this palette. But I think just thinking of like overall color story, even though this is always usually a very bold, very purple look. Okay, I'm gonna advance the Odin's Eye Jewels and Gem eyeshadow palette, but just know there's a couple shades in here that are a little trickier to work with. And then like this would have been like a situation where like my dream was like the better team had more skill, but then Jewels and Gem just scraped out the win in the end. Like, they were the underdog, they were scrappy, and they got it done. And the thing that got it done was the shades Swoon, High, and Rhapsody. Okay, do we need more lip gloss? I feel like maybe just a touch. Look at those metallic nude lips. All right, next up, I just want to make sure I'm like got the right matches against the right matches. All right, we have Odin's Eye Christmas against Dominique Cosmetics Latte. It's definitely going to Christmas. Fun color story. Love the special shades in here. There's so much, like, there's so much variety in this palette. There's so much fun to be had. Yes, this would be a very easy reach if you didn't really want to think about the look that you're creating, but I feel like there's just so much less I can do with this eyeshadow palette than this. So it's gonna go to Odin's Eye Merry Christmas. And then its sister is also competing in this round, and we have Christmas Eve. Ooh, this is a tough one against Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 4. Oh my gosh, this is so tough because I love blues. There's some fun shades, some fun special shades, but then we have like the 10 just extremely unique shades in the Danessa Myricks palette, and you do have these additional four larger pans in the center, which I know are not everyone's cup of tea. Like, these two shades are water activated, but I've actually had a lot of fun with the center shades as well. I'm gonna have to give it to Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 4. I just think it's extremely unique, but it does pain me to send Christmas Eve home. Okay, I've been dreading this next one. Like, this is such a difficult decision. So I have the Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace up against Unearthly Sorcerer's Smoke. Like, how do I even decide? Truly, I think I'm gonna have to go with Tiny Marvels because this, like, the shade Scarab is one of the best. It's not even really like a blue brown, it's more of like a green, it like more is like a green red. Am I saying that right? Is that how I feel about it? Like a blue, no, that's a blue brown. That is a blue brown. Which one is the one that I'm thinking was a blue brown but is more of like a reddish brown? Anyway, it has Scarab, which is such a beautiful shade. Fire Butts, we have this really beautiful lavender matte shade. We've got greens, we've got neutrals. We're giving it to Tiny Marvels. I'm sorry, Sorcerer's Smoke. This is also a phenomenal eyeshadow palette. All right, this one also is difficult. So we have Huda Beauty Rose Quartz against Ensley Rain's Flower Moon. And this one's difficult because both are beautiful and both have some really, really beautiful special shades. But I think I'm gonna give it to Rose Quartz simply because I haven't finished testing out Flower Moon, whereas I've no pan left behind in this eyeshadow palette, and I just freaking adore this eyeshadow palette. This one has definitely gotten more use, whereas I don't know how every shade performs in this palette yet. So we're gonna give it to Rose Quartz for this round. Okay, you guys, this is an interesting matchup. So we have we have Kaleidos Club Nebula against Dose of Colors Baked Browns. We have So Colorful against just Neutral Everyday. I think I'm gonna have to go with Club Nebula simply because an all matte look is just not what I'm doing ever, and I would be really sad if I was told I could only do all matte looks for the rest of my life. So I'm gonna give it to Club Nebula simply because it has both matte and shimmers. All right, this one is also a little bit difficult. So we have the Gloomy Gardens palette Again, a very colorful palette, colorful indie, against the most OG of OGs in my collection, Tartelette in Bloom, a palette I've repurchased because I truly missed it so freaking much. Do I go with the staple that I've traveled with so much, or do I go with this? Oh man, this one's so tough. And I feel like in some rounds my heart has told me to go with like the indie fun palette, and then in other rounds it's told me to go more neutral. I think I'm actually gonna go with Tartelette in Bloom on this one, simply because this was like my first palette. I had so many pans in this palette, and it's hard to hit pan in Tarte eyeshadows, and then I went on to repurchase it after like a year of not having this in my collection because I missed it so much. And while I do love this eyeshadow palette, I do feel a little bit limited in what I can do, just in terms of like, sometimes my brain just doesn't work the best with the most colorful mattes. And I'm not a huge lover of like mint green, like, or just these bright greens. I think those are like, or like bluey greens, they don't really work for me in my complexion. I just don't love working with them. I love these 5 shades on the bottom, and the mattes are really, really nice in this eyeshadow palette. But I think I'm gonna have to give it to my staple here. I'm gonna have to give it to the staple. We're going Tartelette in Bloom for this round. All right, this one is also difficult. We have the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette against ABH Cosmos, which I really, 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 really like both of these eyeshadow palettes. I think both are absolutely stunning and beautiful. Ooh, this is so hard. This one has the shade Citrine, which I love for an inner corner yellow. This also has Earth-like, which is a beautiful kind of like blue, green, brown. I thought I was gonna go ABH Cosmos, but now I'm like actually leaning towards Geodes. I think I'm actually gonna go Geodes, and maybe it's because we're like entering spring, so this one is just like, I don't know, the bright colors are just giving me a little bit more spring, but I'm shocking myself in an upset, in a turn of events. Geodes is actually going to move on, and Cosmos is going home. I'm just as surprised as you are. Okay, you guys, this simply isn't fair that these two ended up against one another so early on in the competition. It's not fair. We have ColourPop Limoncello against Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. Like, it's simply not fair. This I love for warm, as well as the yellow and the green. But then like, this is such a staple, neutral, cool leaning palette. I feel like I have to give it to I Need a Nude, but like this, like I'm literally like, the game is ending and I'm crying that this palette is going home. But I also was like, I didn't know who to root for even while I was watching the game. Oh, this one's tough. I Need a Nude is moving on though. Next one is a good pairing, but not a difficult decision for me. So we have Viseart Soleil La Plage against Glamlight Ice Cream Dream, and I'm gonna advance Viseart simply because this is a larger, more colorful palette, and this is something I reach for way more frequently than this. So Viseart is moving on. All right, you guys, next up we have the Melt Gemini palette against ABH Nuevo. ABH Nuevo. Final answer. Simply because this does have a bit of grunginess to it as well. But then we have like the lilac in here and the shade Lily, which I love. This one's more difficult to work with in my opinion. It is an OG classic staple. This is like if Duke was going home in like second round. But sorry, Gemini, you're going home. ABH, you're moving on. Okay, this one also just seems not fair because like I would like to see Odin's Eye Sea Talk move on, but it's against an SMIRX Volume 3, and like I just can't not choose this one. I love it so much. So that was an easy one. All right, this next one is a difficult one. We have not ABH, we have Dose of Colors Funcation against Cosmic Brushes The Muse. I have hair in my face. All right, ignore the hair sticking to my lips right now. Okay, this is like just getting like a bit dry and crusty. Like this palette is just like getting old. So I feel like this is like one of the top seeded, like if I were to relate this to the tournament, it's a top seed, but like too many players are injured on the team that like the up and coming team kind of like stole the show. So I'm gonna move on with the Cosmic Brushes The Muse. There's also just some fun variety in like the colors in here, but this paints me, and I'm actually like not actually getting rid of friendcation. Like we love friendcation still. I have a country concert in June. We'll be wearing this, like no question. But for right now, friendcation needs to go home, and Cosmic Brush's Muse is moving on. Ooh, we have two Odin's Eye palettes against one another. So we have the Hella palette against the Stone and Rock palette, and this is so tough. This is my most used palette in 2022, and also one of my most used palettes last year, but I cannot deny how much I love this color story in this eyeshadow palette. So while I've used this palette less, I just love the greens in both the shimmers and like the grungy mattes. And I'm a little bit surprised by this as well, but Stone and Rock is actually going to advance. And I'm so sorry, Hella, you're going home. All right, next up we have NARS Summer Unrated against, and this one is gonna look a little bit different just because I have been doing some custom Natasha midis, but it's gonna be against Natasha Denona Retro, and I'm gonna go Natasha Denona Retro. I really, really like the Natasha Denona Retro palette. The color story is beautiful, and I'm always really happy with the looks that I create with this one. And while I still like the NARS Summer Unrated eyeshadow palette, I just prefer the Natasha Denona Retro formula specifically. So this is a really beautiful one though. Anyway, Summer Unrated is going home. Next up we have Blend Bunny Surge, which I haven't finished testing, but I will say, as I said last round, the mattes in the Blend Bunny, like, it's incredible. I am so blown away for any matte eyeshadow formula, but especially to be from an indie brand. I'm like, oh my, like every other eyeshadow brand needs to take notes from the Blend Bunny mattes. That is going up against the ColourPop Miss Piggy, and I'm going to give it to ColourPop Miss Piggy simply because I loved my experience No Pan left behind in this eyeshadow palette, and I haven't finished testing this one out. So I don't know that I love every single shade in this palette, but I do know that I love all of the shades in this one. So Miss Piggy, you're moving on. Next up, Melt Smoke Sessions against the Amartine Crystal Quad from Aether Beauty. It's going to be Melt Smoke Sessions. It's a quad compared, I mean, the quad was lucky, honestly, to advance even to round 2. Like, let's be real. But Melt Smoke Sessions, there's 6 very beautiful green shimmers in here. I don't love the mattes in this palette, but I love the shimmers. So Smoke Sessions is advancing. Oh my gosh. I did not even realize these two were gonna end up against one another. Okay, this is a painful one. So we have Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 5, which I love, and you guys know I just like to talk about how incredibly unique the Danessa Myricks Lightworks palettes are. And then we have that against one of my absolute favorite palettes in my entire collection, which is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural. And I'm gonna have to go Glaminatrix Nearly Natural simply because there's mattes in this one. And then on top of that, the metallic formula in this eyeshadow palette is so punchy and so fun, but it like actually pains me. Danessa Myricks Volume 5 is going home in round 2. There are so many beautiful shades in this palette. All right, this next one is a good one because we have two like neutral palettes against one another. We have the Artist Couture Supreme Bronze against the Danessa Myricks Groundworks eyeshadow palette. Now this I primarily use just for my brows. I haven't yet gotten around to using every single shade. I do know you can use some of these shades, well, however you want, like as bronzer, contour, like you can use them. You can use any makeup however you want, but specifically like this is eye and face, I believe. And then we have the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes, and I'm gonna have to give it to Supreme Nudes. Love the packaging, love the formula, and I use this has come traveling with me quite frequently. I use this on my eyes, not just my brows. Granted, maybe I'll end up using this palette on more than just my brows at some point, but for right now, Supreme Nudes is going to be moving on. Oh, then this is also an interesting one. So I have ColourPop Going Coconuts against Melt Rust. Two different neutral color stories. We have this grungy rust color story versus this very neutral color story. I think I'm gonna go Melt Rust. I do really enjoy this palette. I love the formula. And this palette I like to keep around, but I just never feel motivated or excited to reach for Going Coconuts. So Melt Rust is gonna move on. And then the final pairing in this round is, ooh, this one's so tough too. Okay, we have the Kaleidos Flower Punk against Adept Flying Fiddles. Why must they do this to me? Okay, Kaleidos I really love all but the mint shades. Like there's something about mint on my eyes specifically, I think makes me look like I actually feed peanuts to elephants at the circus. Like that is what, like I do just look like, I look like that's my job when I'm wearing mint eyeshadow. The rest of this palette I freaking love. Like there's like these 3 shades, I can think of a look that I've created a couple of times with these 3 shades, and I love it every single time. I feel so pretty in it. Same thing with these 4 like more like grungy, yet like we have this really like limey chartreuse but dirty limey chartreuse shade. So pretty. But then we have the Adept Flying Fiddles, which is newer to my collection, but I've also like I know I like every shade in this palette. And I'm gonna have to go Adept Flying Fiddles. There's just more variety in terms of what I can do with this eyeshadow palette, but it does pain me to send Kaleidos Flower Punk home. But Adept Flying Fiddles is gonna fly on to the next round. And after that, you guys, that is going to wrap up and conclude round 2 in the Palette Madness tournament for 2024. We're down to 40 eyeshadow palettes in the tournament. Would love your guesses. Would love to know in the comments if you were surprised by any palettes that either went home or advanced. And if you have any predictions, any new predictions. That's kind of creepy. Okay, that is actually creepy. That's like one of the... Okay. It's a nice, lovely young lady that just got dropped off, but by like a big white van. Anyway. Would love to know if you have any new like speculations as to which palettes you think are gonna make like the Sweet 16, Final 8, Final 4. Let a girl know in the comments below what you're thinking. Other than that, thanks so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel, for supporting Palette Week like you guys always do. I appreciate you guys and I love you so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.